Hi, my name is Jake Agatucci. Welcome to my signature assignment proposal. It's entitled Understanding Gamification. The overriding topic for the lesson that I would present is obviously gamification, which is the process of taking a goal-oriented environment and nesting the progression towards said goal and activities associated with gaming. In other words, it's taking a typical lesson that would have maybe a conventional approach to presenting information and assessing that information, and working into that gamified approaches to topic engagement, to assessment, anywhere that you could see providing a gamified approach. The goal of the instruction for this assignment would be to foster awareness of a new assignment design approach in a group that already have an expertise in traditional education goal-oriented assignment design. So in other words, a bunch of teachers who have been teaching for quite a while but haven't ever used or thought about using a gamified approach to their lesson design. The overriding rationale and what makes this manageable is that just to consider gamification as an option for housing a progression of learning is an intellectual process or an intellectual skill, because it asks learners to synthesize understood concepts within a presentation approach that is new to the learner. In turn, it should be noted that students receiving this instruction will only be asked to demonstrate their understanding of gamification by theoretically explaining how they would transform their assignments, rather than actually implementing a gamified assignment within their classroom. In other words, this lesson would present them with the tools to consider gamification, to theoretically play around with how they would transform one of their assignments, and then to speculate about how they might most effectively do that and what the results might be, rather than actually implementing it. So this would just be the lesson on exposing them to the concept of gamification as an option for course design. So tasks that we would focus on as part of the lesson. One, synthesizing gamification approaches to assignment design with traditional approaches to assignment design. That I'd like to impart upon them the similarities and differences between conventional assignment design approach and gamification approaches. Part of this would involve identifying their own learning theories, just to get a sense of sort of what currently informs how they assign their conventional lessons. Part of this would also involve gamification, that is identifying the primary approaches to gamification, and understanding some of its basic models. I'd like to offer the types of models that the instructors could have a variety where they could sort of see potentials in some various manifestations of gamification. So it's not just one model and then do this. I'd like to provide various models so they can actually consider different approaches and find one that might appeal to them. The second task would be applying gamification to assignment design. And as part of this, they would identify an assignment in one of their courses that they feel could be gamified. So part of this will just be taking what they currently have going and pulling in a lesson they think they could work with and revise. They would also have to choose a gamification approach that they feel would be most effective at achieving the goal of the assignment that they pull in for this particular piece of instruction. And then they'd have to describe different redesign objectives for the chosen assignment that would transform it into a gamified learning progression. Okay. The third task would be theoretical, so to speak. That is, this would be talking about assessment if they actually did implement the gamified version of this lesson. So as part of this lesson, on just getting them exposed to gamification and letting them play around with transforming one of their current lessons, we'd also discuss assessment and talk about things that they could do once they actually use the gamified version. Of course, one basic approach would be simply comparing the traditional assignment and how it has performed in the past with impressions from the gamified version of the assignment if you actually implemented it, or if the person receiving the instruction then went out and implemented it in one of their classes. This would also involve discussing survey questions, things they could ask. So we'd brainstorm as part of this lesson things that could be asked of students that would help produce constructive criticism, right, of the gamified version, which would hopefully provide data to help further assessment and revision if it was going to continue to be used, or to help the instructor make a determination on whether to maybe never use gamified lesson approaches ever again if that was where they were at. And then, of course, C, talking about redesign. The idea is that once you gather data from your students and your own sort of self-reflection, of course, if you're going to pursue the gamified version of the lesson, you would come up with redesign approaches, revision objectives, and we would talk about that in theoretical format as part of this presentation. Now, some of the questions that would come up for the subject matter expert, so things to consider as a way of presenting this assignment, of course, are what are the strengths and weaknesses of gamified assignments in comparison to traditionally designed assignments. That is presenting and offering awareness of the fact that gamified assignments just have strengths and weaknesses just like all other assignment designs, and being able to present those things to the instructors so they can make better decisions about the approaches they take if they do choose to gamify an assignment. Some of the major design hurdles that must be overcome in order to implement gamified assignments would have to be discussed as part of this presentation as well and considered on the part of the SME. And the most accessible models for gamified academic assignments would have to be researched, pulled in, made presentable, and used in concise fashion to expose the learners in this particular lesson with quick, efficient models that would help them realize the variety of gamified possibilities in lesson or course design. In the end, the three primary objectives or outcomes would be to understand the differences and similarities between traditional and gamified academic assignment design, to identify assignment types most appropriate for gamification redesign, and to predict strengths and weaknesses connected with gamification redesign as preparation for future implementation. Real quick, in terms of a 20-minute lesson, which this would fall into, I wouldn't have a problem offering an impromptu quiz at a certain point after a presentation of material, but primarily this lesson would focus on group collaboration, that is, instructors getting together with their conventional assignments, talking about the models that they see and that they've been presented with, and then brainstorming about approaches they can take to gamifying their existing assignments. And then a reflective essay, and this is something that I would pose as something they would do after they actually implement a gamified approach, is to do a reflective essay as a way of measuring their overall satisfaction with the gamified approach from the instructor standpoint, in addition to the student data that they would gather. That is my presentation. Thank you for listening.